She was just a woman in a window seat. Jacket over her face. Fast asleep. Nobody looked at her twice. Nobody thought anything of her. But somewhere over the North Atlantic, at 3 in the morning, 35,000 feet in the air, the Pentagon got on the radio and cleared her name. And nothing on that plane was ordinary anymore. Before you watch full story, comment below from which country are you watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more amazing stories. Kestrel 7, confirm package is in transit. Authorization Lima November 0. Standing by. That is all. A voice. A frequency. 3 words that mean nothing to you right now, and everything to someone else on this aircraft. Pull back. Come into the cabin. Row 14. Middle seat. The worst seat you could have drawn on an 11-hour transatlantic flight, and you drew it. Seat 14B, squeezed between the man on your right who claimed the armrest 6 hours ago and has not moved his elbow since, and the woman on your left, in the window seat, 14A, who has been asleep since before the wheels left the ground at London Heathrow. She has a jacket pulled over her face. Not folded behind her head. Not draped loosely over her shoulders. Pulled completely over her face, like a wall she built between herself and the rest of the world, and she constructed it before you even finished buckling your seatbelt, and she has not moved since, and you have resented her for it in the small, deeply personal way that you resent strangers who sleep easily on aircraft when you cannot. You have catalogued the specific unfairness of it. The ease of it. The complete absence of effort on her part. She closed her eyes, pulled the jacket up, and left. Just like that. Gone to wherever people who sleep on planes go. And you have been watching the back of her hand for 2 hours. Her left hand. Resting on the armrest between your seats. Not claiming it aggressively the way the man on your right is claiming his, just resting there, still, the way hands rest when the person they belong to is genuinely, deeply, completely asleep. You have been looking at it. You are not entirely sure why. But there is something on the knuckle of her index finger. A scar. Small. An old scar, healed smooth, slightly raised, curved like a comma or the tail of a question mark. You have been looking at it for 2 hours without knowing why it holds your attention, and you will spend the rest of your life knowing exactly why, once you understand who this woman is. But that comes later. Hey, if this is your first time here, please consider subscribing. And if this story gets you, really gets you, hit the like button before we're done. It means more than you know. Now. I need to tell you who she was. Because I didn't know. Nobody on that plane knew. And the not knowing is the whole point of this story. You are on a Boeing 777-200ER operated by a fictional airline, flying from London Heathrow to Washington Dulles. The flight is 11 hours long. You are 7 hours in. The time, somewhere in the geography between midnight and 3 in the morning, is the particular hour that belongs to no one, too late for the people who wanted to stay awake, too early for the people hoping to arrive rested. The cabin is in that late-night state that only long international flights achieve. Most of the overhead lights are off. The reading lights of 3 or 4 people throw small isolated cones of yellow across their seats. Most passengers are horizontal or attempting it, wrapped in the thin blue airline blankets, heads tilted at the angles that necks adopt when sleep is present but not quite comfortable. Somewhere in the back of the aircraft, a child cries briefly, stops, cries again, then goes quiet. The flight attendants move through the aisles with the particular softness of people navigating a sleeping house, careful, deliberate, almost apologetic in their presence. You are traveling back from a work trip that went badly. For days in London for a client presentation that landed wrong in ways you should have anticipated but did not. The client smiled too much during the meeting. You know what that means now. When a client smiles too much and says very little and nods at your slides with the polite attentiveness of someone who has already made a decision and is simply waiting for the meeting to end so they can act on it, that is not engagement. That is patience. You have been performing competence for 4 days, in the prep calls, in the hotel room at midnight running through the deck one more time, in the meeting itself where you smiled back and kept your voice steady and professional. And now the performance is over and you are 7 hours into 11 and you are wearing the particular exhaustion that comes not from doing too much but from maintaining a version of yourself that requires continuous effort. You want to be home. You want your own bed and your own kitchen and the specific quiet of your own walls. You want to stop being in transit. You want to stop being on this aircraft next to this man with his elbow on your armrest, which he has occupied for 6 hours, and which you have not contested, because you never contest these things, and you are aware that this is a pattern in your life, the not saying anything, the choosing the small sacrifice over the small confrontation, and you are aware that this pattern has a cost and you are paying it right now in the form of a right arm that has been pressed against your side for 6 hours. And the woman in 14A has not moved in 3 hours. Jacket over her face. Left hand on the armrest. The scar on her knuckle. You look at your phone. You look at the flight tracker map. You are over the North Atlantic. The tiny plane icon sits on a curved line between a small drawing of England and a small drawing of the eastern coast of the United States. The estimated time of arrival has not changed since the last time you checked it 12 minutes ago. You look back at the scar on her knuckle. 2 things happen within 4 minutes of each other, and at the time you do not connect them. The first, a flight attendant walks forward through the cabin. Not running. Not panicked. Nothing that would alarm anyone in the seats around you. But walking with a purpose that is faster than the careful, quiet, measured pace she has maintained for the last 6 hours. There is a direction to it. A destination. She is going somewhere specific and she is going there now, and she is doing it in the practiced way of airline crew who have been trained to move with urgency without appearing urgent, and she disappears through the curtain into the forward galley, and you watch her go, and then you look back at your phone, because you noticed this the way you notice things at 3 in the morning when your senses have nothing else to occupy them, and so they catalog everything, and the cataloging does not mean anything yet, and so you let it go. The second, the woman in 14A wakes up. Not gradually. Not surfacing slowly the way people surface from deep sleep, the way you have watched dozens of passengers around you do over the last 7 hours, a slow reorganization of limbs, a brief confusion, a recalibration of where they are and why. She does not do any of that. She wakes completely and instantly. The jacket is already moving off her face before she takes her second breath. Her eyes are open and fully present before her body has shifted in the seat. She looks immediately at the window. Not through it. At the reflection in it. She uses the dark of the North Atlantic night outside the glass as a mirror, and she scans the cabin behind her in that reflection with the specific, practiced efficiency of someone checking a space they are responsible for monitoring. You watch her do this. You are not sure, in the moment, whether you were meant to see it. She turns to you. Her eyes are dark brown, red-rimmed from sleep, and completely awake. Not foggy. Not slow. Awake in a way that goes beyond what sleep should allow, awake the way someone is awake when wakefulness is a skill they have spent years developing. She does not say hello. She does not apologize for the armrest. She asks you one question, direct and quiet, no preamble, as if the conversation started before either of you opened your mouths. Has anyone come through the cabin in the last few minutes? You tell her about the flight attendant. The fast walk. The forward galley. She nods once. The nod is not casual. It is a receipt, she has been given information and she has processed it and filed it. She reaches under the seat in front of her and pulls out a bag you did not notice when she boarded. It is the kind of bag that is designed not to be noticed. She unzips it in her lap, does something with her hands inside it that you cannot fully see from the angle of 14B, re-zips it. She puts it back under the seat. Then she sits back in the way of someone who has just completed a necessary task, and she looks at the seat back in front of her, and her expression is not calm, calm is passive, calm is the absence of something, and what she has is not the absence of anything but rather the complete management of everything, controlled, which is calm's harder and more deliberate cousin, And she sits in it like a person who has worn it so long it has taken the shape of her. You do not know what just happened. You will not know for another 40 minutes. 2 rows ahead of you, in seat 12C, is a man named Gregor Vasek. He is traveling on a Czech passport. He booked this flight 6 days ago through 3 separate intermediary booking agencies whose names do not appear together on any public record. He was flagged by a Europol watch list update, specifically, a revised alert that went out to partner intelligence services, that arrived at British intelligence 17 minutes after this aircraft pushed back from the gate at Heathrow. He is not a terrorist. He does not have a weapon. He is a courier. He is carrying encrypted materials on a device in his carry-on luggage in the overhead bin above row 12, and 3 governments currently need the contents of that device for 3 different reasons, and the identity of his contact in Washington, the person he is traveling to meet, the person who will receive what he is carrying, is not yet known. His presence on this specific flight, on this specific day, is either a carefully arranged piece of intelligence tradecraft or an elaborate coincidence, and nobody in any of the relevant agencies has yet been able to determine which. The flight crew received notification by radio from British intelligence, relayed through the airline's operations center, approximately 30 minutes before the events you just witnessed in row 14. They were given 2 instructions. First, do nothing overt. Second, confirm whether a specific passenger in row 14 is, in fact, who her documentation says she is. Her documentation says she is Dr. Sarah Okonkwo, 41 years old, a medical researcher returning from a London conference to her position at Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore. This is true. It is true in every verifiable detail. It is also incomplete in the way that certain people's documentation is always technically accurate and structurally incomplete, like a map that shows every road but leaves out the landscape those roads move through. The flight crew confirms her seat. Row 14. Window. The radio goes quiet. 6 minutes pass. Then a response comes back, and this is the part the captain will describe afterward to investigators in language that sounds, coming from a man who has spent 31 years flying aircraft of increasing size and responsibility, almost odd. The response comes not from the airline's operations center, not from British intelligence, but from a frequency the captain has used exactly once before in his entire career and, until this moment, hoped never to use again. The response clears her name. Not generally. Specifically. By a designation that the captain does not repeat aloud, because the first officer sitting 18 inches to his left does not have the security clearance required to hear it, and the captain has spent 31 years respecting protocols and he is not about to stop at 35,000 feet over the North Atlantic. The captain makes a decision. He sends a flight attendant to row 14. And now you have watched her walk forward and disappear through the curtain, and you are sitting in the suddenly larger space her absence has created, and you have the armrest, and you have the window, and you have everything you spent 7 hours wanting, and you feel, for a reason you cannot explain and will not understand for 3 weeks, worse than you did before she woke up. Piece her together the way you piece her together later. From fragments. From the brief conversation the flight attendant has with you when Sarah returns to her seat and the attendant lingers a moment too long, clearly needing to tell someone. From a small item in a specialized national security newsletter 3 weeks after the flight. From the one interview Sarah gives, which is careful and contained and tells you almost nothing and somehow, through the architecture of what it leaves out, tells you everything. Her name is Dr. Sarah Okonkwo. The medical researcher part is entirely real, Johns Hopkins, infectious disease, 15 years of published research, peer-reviewed papers, a reputation in her field that her colleagues describe as formidable. The part before that is the part that takes longer to assemble, because it was not built to be assembled from the outside. She grew up in Lagos. She came to the United States at 17 years old on an academic scholarship that she had competed for against students from 40 countries and won. She studied biochemistry. She was recruited during her PhD by an agency she has never named publicly and will not name, an agency whose name, if you knew it, would tell you more about the architecture of certain kinds of invisible work than she is permitted to confirm. She spent 9 years doing work she has never described specifically, not in interviews, not in the careful way she chose her words in the one public conversation she agreed to have, not anywhere. The work existed. It cost her things. It gave her things. The accounting of it is hers and she has not shared the ledger. She left that work when her daughter was born. Not because she was asked to leave. Not because the work had ended or the agency had decided she was finished. She left because she looked at her daughter, a newborn, already named after Sarah's own mother, already the most significant fact in the world, and she made a calculation that had nothing to do with strategy or security clearance or the particular demands of the invisible work, and the calculation told her that some things cost more than they return, and she accepted the answer. She has been at Johns Hopkins for 8 years. She is exactly what her documentation says she is. Exactly that, and nothing less, and also, occasionally, rarely, when something specific arises that requires a specific kind of person with a specific kind of knowledge and a specific kind of trained judgment, she is also the other thing. Not an agent. Not an operative in any active sense. A consultant. The word covers a range of engagements that are as different from one another as the situations that require them, and she answers certain calls, and she gets on certain flights, and she sits in window seats with jackets over her face, and her left hand rests on the armrest, and there is a scar on the knuckle of her index finger from a situation in 2009 that is still classified and will remain classified for the foreseeable future. She has a daughter. 11 years old. Named after Sarah's mother. She is the reason Sarah left the work and the reason Sarah occasionally, rarely, comes back to it, and the tension between those two facts is not a contradiction Sarah has resolved. It is a condition she lives inside. She has been living inside it for 8 years. She will live inside it for the rest of her life. She has decided, not easily and not without grief, that this is the honest shape of the life she has chosen, and she carries it. This is what you learn later, assembled from what was told and what was written and what the gaps between those things suggest. Sarah is taken to the forward galley. The laptop that appears is small and government-issued and was placed on the aircraft before boarding by someone you never saw. She is shown the Europol file on Gregor Vasek. She is shown the intelligence assessment about the device in the overhead bin above row 12 and the uncertainty about his Washington contact and the window of time available before the aircraft lands and those circumstances change. She reads all of it in 4 minutes. She does not take notes. She asks 2 questions. She is given a full answer to the first question and told that the answer to the second question is not available at this altitude on this frequency, meaning the people who know the answer are on the ground and the secure connection currently running through this aircraft cannot carry it. She thinks for 90 seconds. You should understand what that 90 seconds contains. It contains 15 years of infectious disease research and 9 years of a kind of work she has never described and the specific knowledge of how certain kinds of encrypted devices function and where they go and what they authorize when they arrive at their destinations. It contains the weight of an 11-year-old girl waiting at home in Baltimore who does not know her mother is standing in a forward aircraft galley 40 minutes from completing a situation assessment. It contains a line, the line Sarah drew 8 years ago between what she would do and what she would not do, and it contains the precise memory of where that line sits, because she has checked its position so many times that she could find it in the dark. She tells the captain what she believes the device contains. She explains why it matters, not technically, not in the jargon of intelligence work, but in the plainest language of consequence. She tells him what she thinks should happen in the next 3 hours, before this aircraft lands at Dulles, to give the relevant agencies the position they need. She tells him clearly what she is willing to do and what she is not willing to do, and the boundary between those two things is drawn with a precision that tells the captain everything he needs to know about the kind of person he is dealing with. The captain contacts the ground. The ground contacts people above them. The frequency goes quiet. 11 minutes. 11 minutes in which the aircraft flies on autopilot over the North Atlantic and the captain sits in his seat with the weight of what he has just heard, and the first officer flies, and a woman in the forward galley waits with the stillness of someone who has learned that certain kinds of waiting are themselves a form of work. Then the response comes. It comes from the Pentagon. Not from the airline. Not from British intelligence. From the Pentagon, directly, on a frequency the captain has used once in his life, clearing her name and clearing her judgment and endorsing her recommended course of action in language that the captain will describe to investigators, weeks later, as the most authoritative communication he has ever received in 31 years of flying. His voice, the investigators later note, carries a quality they do not often hear from experienced airline captains. Something close to wonder. Sarah returns to seat 14A. She sits down. She puts the jacket back over her legs, not her face this time. She looks out the window at the North Atlantic dark moving below, and she does not sleep. You are awake. You have been awake the whole time. You do not ask her anything, because you are the person who does not say anything, and this pattern in your life, which you have been unhappy about for years, right now means that you sit in silence next to a woman who has just spoken to the Pentagon from a Boeing 777 over the Atlantic Ocean, and you know none of this, and you are thinking about a presentation that landed wrong and a client who smiled too much. She turns to you once. Unprompted. She says, "You should sleep. We land in 4 hours." Her voice has the quality of someone who has learned to offer small kindnesses in the intervals between large responsibilities, brief, genuine, given without expectation of anything in return. You say you can't sleep on planes. It is the honest answer. She says, "I know. Most people can't. The trick is to stop trying and just rest. Sleep finds you when you stop chasing it." Then she looks back out the window. You think about this for a long time. Meanwhile, quietly, in the rows around you, in the forward galley, in communications passing between this aircraft and the ground below at frequencies you cannot hear, things are being arranged. Objects are noted. Positions are confirmed. People on the ground are repositioning. The architecture of an interception is being built at 35,000 feet, calmly, without a single passenger in the cabin noticing anything unusual. You notice none of it. This is entirely intentional. The aircraft lands at Dulles normally. The gate is normal. The jetway connects with the familiar thud and hiss. The seatbelt signs go off. The cabin fills with the sound of overhead bins opening and people standing and the particular restless shuffle of 240 people who have been in one place for 11 hours and now need to be somewhere else. You stand and pull your bag from the bin and move forward in the aisle the way you always do on long flights, slowly, patiently, not pushing, not making it worse for anyone, the particular resigned patience of deplaning after an overnight international crossing when everyone is heavy and slow and nobody is pretending otherwise. She is ahead of you in the aisle. She has her bag over one shoulder and she moves through the jetway at a pace that is unhurried and exactly purposeful. Not fast. Not slow. Moving with the specific efficiency of someone whose body knows where it is going even when the path is not yet fully visible. At the end of the jetway, where it opens into the terminal, 3 people are waiting. They are not in uniform. They are in civilian clothes. But civilian clothes of a specific kind, the shoes, the posture, the way each of them stands with their weight distributed not casually but in readiness, as if their bodies have made the same calculation about potential movement that certain people's bodies make automatically and without thought. They are standing still, but they are standing still the way a held breath is still. They fall in around her without ceremony. She does not break stride. She does not acknowledge them with surprise. She says something to the one closest to her, a brief exchange, 3 or 4 words, and she keeps walking, and within 30 seconds she has turned a corner and is gone, and the terminal has swallowed her, and there is nothing left in that space where she was except the ordinary noise of an airport in the early morning hours. You stand at the end of the jetway for a moment. Then you go through customs. You wait for your bag at the carousel. You take the shuttle to long-term parking. You drive home on the interstate in the early light, the sky going from black to gray to the particular pale blue of a morning that has not yet committed to being warm or cold. You do not tell anyone about any of this because you do not have anything to tell. You saw a woman sleep on a plane and wake up and walk to the front and come back and tell you to stop chasing sleep. That is the entirety of what you witnessed. 3 weeks later, a colleague forwards you an email. The subject line is, "interesting," with no further context, which is exactly the kind of subject line that colleague always uses, and you almost delete it without opening it. Inside is a short item from a national security newsletter, the kind of specialized publication that appears in the inboxes of people who track these things professionally, not front-page news, not something a general audience would ever read. It describes, in the spare and carefully qualified language of this kind of journalism, the quiet interception of a courier on a transatlantic flight 3 weeks earlier. The recovery of an encrypted device. The disruption of a network that had been active and operational for 4 years. The successful identification and apprehension of the courier's Washington contact before any transfer of materials could occur. And the central role played, in the intelligence assessment that made all of this possible, by a civilian consultant whose name is not given but whose institutional affiliation is described, briefly, as Johns Hopkins University. You read it once. You read it a second time. You read it a third time. You sit at your desk for a while without doing anything. You think about the scar on her knuckle. The old scar, healed smooth, curved like a question mark, that you spent 2 hours looking at without knowing why it held your attention. You think about the jacket pulled over her face and the way she woke, not gradually, not with the slow confusion of deep sleep, but completely and instantly, already scanning the cabin's reflection in the window before she had taken her second breath. You think about 11 minutes of radio silence at 35,000 feet over the North Atlantic while the Pentagon considered her name. You think about 3 people at the end of a jetway in civilian clothes that were not quite civilian. You think about the way she said sleep finds you when you stop chasing it, the way she said it like someone who had learned it the hard way, in conditions that had nothing to do with a comfortable seat on a commercial aircraft, in conditions that probably had everything to do with a scar on the knuckle of an index finger and a night in 2009 that remains classified. You think about the client meeting. The presentation that landed wrong. The smile that meant they had already decided. These things were, 7 hours into an 11-hour flight, the largest problems in your life. You were carrying them with the full weight that people assign to the things that are largest in their current field of view. Do not rush what comes next. This is where it lives, the real center of this story. You think about what it means to carry something that cannot be named in public. To be, in every visible respect, exactly what your documentation says you are, a researcher, a mother, a woman in a window seat with a jacket over her face and a hand resting on the armrest, and to also be the person the Pentagon clears by name on a secured frequency at 3 in the morning over the North Atlantic. To hold both of those things simultaneously, not as opposites, not as a contradiction that needs resolving, but as the actual shape of the life you have built, with intention, with full knowledge of what it costs. You think about her daughter. 11 years old. Named after her grandmother. Waiting at home in Baltimore while her mother flew to London for a conference. Not knowing, or knowing in the partial way that children of certain parents always know, which is to say feeling the exact shape and weight of something without having the words for it, sensing the thing that lives between what is said and what is not said, carrying the knowledge in their bodies before they carry it in language. You think about what it costs to be that child and what it costs to be that mother and how Sarah Okonkwo has been paying both of those costs simultaneously for 8 years, without complaint, without credit, without anyone on a commercial aircraft ever knowing. You think about the line she drew 8 years ago, when her daughter was born. The line between what she would do and what she would not do. You think about the precision of it. You think about how she described it to the captain, according to what he later told investigators, the line drawn with the accuracy of a person who has drawn it before and has lived with the consequences of maintaining it and has decided, not without cost but with genuine deliberateness, that the line is real and that the cost of holding it is exactly what she is willing to pay. You think about Gregor Vasek, sitting in seat 12C for 11 hours, reading his phone, eating his airline meal, deplaning normally, being met at customs by people you never saw, his device going somewhere you will never know, his network's disruption preventing something you will never be told. You think about the gap between what happened on that aircraft and what you experienced on that aircraft. 11 hours in the same metal tube at the same altitude above the same ocean. Two completely different realities, one of which you had no access to, one of which existed entirely in the ordinary discomforts of a long flight you were impatient to finish. You think about every flight you have ever taken. Every stranger you have placed in a quick, unconscious category based on what you could see of them in the 3 minutes before the doors closed. The woman who seemed rude about the armrest. The man who reclined his seat the moment the wheels left the ground. The person at the gate who talked on their phone too loudly and too long. The jacket pulled over a face. The hand on the armrest with a scar on the knuckle. You think about how many of those people were carrying things you could not see. Not classified things. Not Pentagon things. Not intelligence consultations conducted at 35,000 feet. Just things. The ordinary, enormous, invisible weight of lives being fully lived behind faces that give nothing away, because giving nothing away is how most people move through most days, because the complete weight of a human life, the daughter named after the grandmother, the line drawn and held for 8 years, the work that cannot be named, the grief and the deliberateness and the small kindnesses offered in the intervals between large responsibilities, is not something that can be carried visibly, without collapsing under the attention it would draw. She was not remarkable because she was a consultant to intelligence agencies. That is the least interesting thing about her. She was remarkable because she had looked at the full accounting of her life, what she could give, what she could not give, what she owed her daughter, what she owed the world, what the world could fairly ask of her and what it could not, and she had stood behind the result. She had chosen, with full knowledge of what both choices cost, to be a mother and to be useful in the specific way that only she could be useful, and she had drawn the line between those two things and held it and maintained it for 8 years and boarded a commercial flight in London and pulled a jacket over her face and went to sleep. Most people's heroism looks exactly like this. Invisible. Ongoing. Conducted in the intervals between ordinary life, between the conference and the flight home, between the boarding gate and the baggage claim, between the armrest and the window. Recognized by almost no one. Not requiring recognition. Continued anyway. You are on a flight 6 months later. Different airline, different route, a domestic leg, nothing unusual. The woman in the window seat next to you has a jacket pulled over her legs and is asleep before you reach cruising altitude. Her breathing is slow and regular and completely at ease. You look at her hands. They are still. There is nothing on her knuckles. No scar, no story visible from the outside, nothing your attention would normally catch and hold. She is, as far as you can tell, exactly what she appears to be, a tired person on a relatively short flight trying to rest. You look out the window. The sky at this altitude is the specific blue that does not exist anywhere else. Not the blue of a clear afternoon at sea level, not the faded blue of a winter sky. The blue of air that is thin enough to show you the darkness that lives beyond it, the darkness that is always there, that you only see from up here. Below, through gaps in the clouds, the country moves past, fields and roads and the small, intricate, humbling patterns of human settlement seen from far enough up that the scale of it is both fully visible and completely beyond ordinary reckoning. The man across the aisle is reading something on his phone. The child 2 rows back is asking questions and her father is answering them patiently, each question leading to the next the way children's questions do, an unbroken chain of curiosity that has no particular destination. The flight attendant is moving through the cabin with the quiet efficiency of someone who has made 1,000 of these passages and will make 1,000 more. You put your headphones in. You close your eyes. You do not sleep. You never sleep on planes. But you rest. You stop chasing it. You let the engine hum move through you the way it does when you stop fighting it, and you think about nothing in particular, and you stay there, in that space, in the hum, in the blue that exists nowhere else, and you let the flight carry you. Somewhere over the country, the woman next to you shifts slightly in her sleep. Her hand moves to the armrest between you. It rests there, still, ordinary, carrying nothing visible. You do not resent it. You look at her hand for a moment, and you think, I have no idea who you are. And for the first time in your life, on an aircraft, in a middle seat, at altitude, you mean this not as a small complaint about the unknowability of strangers, not as the mild frustration of someone who wishes the world came with more legible labels, but as something else entirely. A genuine, open, completely unresolved wonder at the fullness of a stranger. At everything carried invisibly. At all the weight the world moves around on ordinary flights between ordinary cities on ordinary days, quietly, without ceremony, without credit, held by ordinary hands. The aircraft climbs. The blue deepens. You let it find you.